Unit 14. Gateway. The printing press boosted the power of ideas to copy themselves. Prior to low-cost printing, ideas could and did spread by word of mouth. While this was tremendously powerful, it limited the complexity of the ideas that could be propagated to those that a single person could remember. It also added a certain amount of guaranteed error. The spread of ideas by word of mouth was equivalent to a game of telephone on a global scale. The advent of literacy and the creation of handwritten scrolls and eventually handwritten books strengthened the ability of large and complex ideas to spread with high fidelity. But the incredible amount of time required to copy a scroll or book by hand limited the speed with which information could spread this way. A well-trained monk could transcribe around 4 pages of text per day. A printing press could copy information thousands of times faster, allowing knowledge to spread far more quickly with full fidelity than ever before. Exercise 1. Play is often discounted as something for children because it does not deal with important survival processes because it is useless. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Play is important because it is useless, because it allows us to act not because of necessity or convenience, but in order to freely express our being. The problem, however, starts again when play becomes a profession, with all the external rewards and responsibilities that this entails. Musicians playing for leading symphony orchestras, or athletes playing for multi-million contracts with elite teams, no longer feel that they play to express their being. Instead, they start feeling that their skill is being used by others for their own ends. When that happens, instead of allowing for the free flow of consciousness, even play becomes part of the iron cage. Exercise 2. One facet of the nominal fallacy, the error of believing that the label carries explanatory information, is the danger of using common words and giving them a scientific meaning. This has the often disastrous effect of leading an unwary public down a path of misunderstanding. Words like theory, law, force do not mean in common discourse what they mean to a scientist. Success in Darwinian evolution is not the same success as taught by Dale Carnegie. Force to a physicist has a meaning quite different from that used in political discourse. The worst of these, though, may be theory and law, which are almost polar opposites, theory being a strong idea in science while vague in common discourse, and law being a much more muscular social than scientific concept. These differences lead to sometimes serious misunderstandings between scientists and the public that supports their work. Exercise 3. There is an optimal level of emotion that is necessary for increased learning. Too much or too little reduces the efficiency of the cortex. This is why movies, books, and music that trigger emotions are easily remembered. The best lessons in life or in a classroom make you laugh, think, or cry. One of my high school teachers removed all the furniture from the classroom and taped small square dimensions on the floor that represented the amount of space a slave was afforded on the ships, transporting them from Africa to America. During that lesson, students were seated tightly packed in their allotted squares for the duration of the period. We struggled to make it through the entire period and wondered how slaves could be in similar positions for months. My high school history teacher created an emotional experience that I remember vividly to this day. Exercise 4. Standards are prevalent in our modern world because they reduce the costs of interactions among the firms and people that subscribe to them. Hence, it is not unexpected to see standards co-evolve with markets. Many people are surprised to learn that only a few centuries ago, simple measures of weight and volume, such as the pound and the pint, were not standard. Even though the same word was used in different towns, the weight of a pound varied from town to town, sometimes by as much as a factor of 4. But as cities began to trade with one another, and governments began to impose their rule over larger areas, the use of standards grew. The coevolution of standards and markets is easy to understand, since anyone buying a bushel of corn from a vendor in another town would want that bushel to mean the same in both towns. So the possibility of trade created an incentive for standardization and helped the expansion of the governments that were keen on the use of standards. Exercise 5. There is an interesting side to the evolutionary process that is illuminated by astronomy. The living organisms we now see all have their structure based upon the element carbon. Most biochemists believe no other basis is possible for life. But where does carbon come from? Carbon originates in the center of stars, where at temperatures of millions of degrees it is cooked from simple protons and neutrons. When the stars reach the end of their lives, they explode and disperse carbon into space and onto the surface of planets and meteorites. However, the time needed to make carbon and other heavier elements like nitrogen and oxygen by this stellar alchemy is very long, nearly 1 billion years. Only after this immense period of time will the building blocks of life be available in the universe, and only then can biochemistry take over. Exercise 6. Even very subtle manipulation of object orientation in an ad design can impact purchase behavior. Advertisers can increase purchase intentions by facilitating mental simulation through their visual depictions of the product. They can do this simply by orienting a product, example, a cake with a fork, toward the right side. While this may not suit the smaller percentage of left-handers, the larger percentage of right-handers will have better mental product interaction. These results also hold for shelf display design in retail environments. For example, a very slight change in display design of mugs in the window of a coffee shop could affect purchases with consumers imagining picking up that coffee mug and drinking from it. Including an instrument, example, a spoon for eating an advertised soup, that facilitates mental simulation should also increase purchase intentions. These consequences of visual depiction impact not just advertising design, but product packaging design and display design as well. Exercise 7. The sun is the ultimate source of all energy on Earth, whether it's used by grass in the fields, trees in the forest, or your car on the road. Though poets might prefer a more evocative comparison, astrophysicists liken the sun to a nuclear fusion reactor. Astronomers observe that the sun's diameter is more than 100 times larger than the Earth's, and it is unimaginably hot, nearly 15 million degrees Celsius at its center. Within that heat, the sun packs enormous pressure. The core is 43 times denser than a diamond. Under these extreme conditions, 4 protons slamming together make one helium atom through nuclear fusion. When that happens, about 0.7% of the mass of the protons is turned into energy, E equals mc squared, and about 0.000000045% of that energy eventually comes flying in our direction in the form of sunlight. That doesn't sound like a lot of energy, but it's enough to power all life on Earth and more. In fact, the energy in sunlight arriving on Earth contains about 12,000 times more energy than humanity uses in a year. Exercise 8. While our brains make up only 2% of our weight, they consume 20% of our energy. They are hungry for oxygen and glucose. This means they are dependent on good blood flow, and good regulation of blood sugar. This is where exercise helps. Poor regulation of blood sugar, for example, is associated with smaller hippocampi, the brain regions responsible for laying down long-term memories. Regular exercise will increase the amount of blood flowing through your brain and improve the delivery of blood sugar. This will help new neurons, brain cells, to grow. Until recently, scientists didn't think adults could grow new neurons. You just had to make do with what you were born with. But we can, and exercise helps this, as well as strengthening connections between existing neurons, improving long-term memories.